It was upon a drab September morning that the case which I have titled A Case of Identity, First Par, presented itself to my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes, and through him to me, his most devoted chronicler. London wore its familiar veil of grey vapour, drifting from chimney to chimney, hanging in the alleys, and clinging to the very panes of the windows on Baker Street. The autumn winds stirred the smoke into restless shapes, while the cries of vendors and the clatter of wheels made a chorus outside. Inside, however, there was the calm, book-laden stillness of our sitting room, broken only by the occasional scrape of Holmes's bow across the strings of his violin and the soft rustle of the newspaper in my hands. Holmes, you appear to be unusually absorbed in the street below. You have scarcely touched your violin this morning, and you have allowed me to read the paper in peace, which is an event rare enough to remark upon.
My dear Watson, you may call it absorption, but I call it the elementary exercise of my art. Every passerby is a line in an open book. Every gesture is a sentence, every garment a paragraph. And all together they tell the history of an individual who believes himself to be wholly anonymous. To you, a man or woman hurries past our window with no more meaning than a raindrop upon the sill. To me, the difference between a tradesman late for his work, a clerk sent on an errand, and a maid given leave to visit her mother is as plain as if they each carried placards of explanation.
I smiled. Chill. Because yeah, silent. But be obliquant as well, for I had long since abandoned any attempt to conceal my admiration for my friend's singular powers. And yet, even after years of intimacy, his manner could still provoke astonishment. His tall, spare figure lounged carelessly in the armchair, his pipe sending up blue spirals of smoke, his eyes alight with that peculiar brightness that denoted the alertness of his mind, even in apparent repose. It was then that Mrs. Hudson entered, her step respectful, and with her announcement came the first flutter of that day's adventure.
A lady to see you, Mr. Holmes. She seems in some agitation, sir, and I thought best to bring her directly up rather than keep her waiting in the hall.
Holmes rose with the air of a host greeting a guest at his club, and into our room stepped a figure that impressed itself upon my memory with vivid force. She was young, perhaps 5 and 20, of fair complexion, and dressed in black of a fashion that was simple but respectable. Her veil she lifted as she entered, revealing features of some comeliness, though marred at present by anxiety. Her gloved hands clasped a small reticule which trembled slightly as she held it. She looked from Holmes to myself, and then, as if reassured by the calm courtesy of my companion, took the chair he indicated.
Pray compose yourself, madam. You are in the hands of one who, I trust, will make light of your difficulties. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson, upon whom you may also rely for discretion and sympathy. And now, kindly give us your name and the circumstances which have brought you through this fog to my door.
My name is Mary Sutherland, sir, and I live with my mother and my stepfather in the neighborhood of Islington. I am not of a nervous disposition, yet I confess the matter which troubles me is of such singularity that I hardly know what to think or whom to trust. They said you were the man who could read the truth as others read a printed page, and so I have ventured here. Though the errand is bold for a lady of my position,
She spoke with a mixture of timidity and earnestness which touched me at once. Her voice was soft but clear, and though she attempted composure, it was evident that her heart was disturbed. Holmes, however, leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing in that hawk-like way I knew so well, and in his next words there was already the premonition of deduction.
You need offer no apology. Miss Sutherland, many who come to this room feel the same weight of perplexity. You will observe that your case, before even a word of detail has left your lips, is not without its signs. The boots, still dusted with yesterday's gravel, tell me you walked far, while the fingers upon your glove betray ink, stains which no lady acquires save by constant correspondence. But pray do not be startled. Everything is elementary when the facts lie open to one's gaze. Now, tell me of the gentleman who has caused this concern.
The lady started visibly at his words, as though a hidden spring had been touched. She clasped her reticule tighter, and her eyes brightened with something between hope and fear.
You are correct, Mr. Holmes, for it is indeed a gentleman who occupies my thoughts. His name, though whether it be his true name I cannot be certain, is Hosmer Angel. I met him first at the gasfitters' ball at the London Mechanics' Institute. He was dressed plainly but with care, and he conducted himself with such reserve and propriety that I found myself trusting him almost at once. My father died some years past and left me with a small income of 100 a year. My stepfather, Mr. Windybank, manages the household and has always pressed me not to form acquaintances beyond the family circle. It was, therefore, with some secrecy that I encouraged Mr. Angel's attentions.
Pray forgive the inquiry, Miss Sutherland, but was your mother aware of this gentleman's courtship, or did it proceed without her knowledge?
My mother was aware, sir, though she did not oppose me. Oh! Oh! It was my stepfather who objected most strongly. He is 15 years younger than my mother, and seems determined that I should not wed, saying always that no man can be trusted, and that my income should remain in the household. But Mr. Angel came only when Mr. Angel, Windybank, was absent upon business in France, and he would never consent to meet him face to face.
As she spoke these words, Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled, his expression composed yet inwardly alert. I could almost hear the machinery of his mind beginning to spin, arranging facts as a chess player arranges his pieces.
I perceive, Miss Sutherland, that you have letters from this Hosmer Angel. Kindly produce them, for handwriting, like clothing, cannot wholly disguise the man beneath.
With a blush, she withdrew several neatly folded notes from her reticule. Holmes took them, examined the paper, the ink, the folds, and then placed them upon the table with a faint smile.
Observe, Watson, the peculiar uniformity of these letters. They are written upon the commonest cream-laid paper, folded with precision, and addressed in a hand that seeks to be ordinary. Even the ink is of that faded hue which results from deliberate dilution. Everything here strives for anonymity, for a voice without an accent, for a presence that vanishes as soon as it appears. It is the handwriting of one who intends to be recognized by no one, who constructs a mask more carefully than an actor upon the stage.
Indeed, Holmes, it seems excessively cautious, yet could it not also indicate modesty or a nature that shrinks from display?
Modesty, Watson, conceals itself, but it does not erase its own lineaments. This is not concealment born of diffidence. It is concealment calculated and contrived. Everything is elementary when the motive is understood. Pray proceed, Miss Sutherland, with the rest of your narrative.
The young woman sighed and went on with her tale, her words falling into the quiet of the room like drops upon still water.
Mr. Angel pressed his suit with an urgency that surprised me, though always with courtesy. At last he asked me to marry him. He insisted, however, that the wedding must be kept secret, and that it should be performed at the church with no one present but the witnesses. I, foolishly perhaps, consented, for he swore he loved me, and I believed him. On the morning of the ceremony, he came to fetch me, dressed in black, wearing dark glasses, and speaking in a low, whispering tone. We went to the church, and I waited at the door while he stepped aside for a moment. That was the last I ever saw of him. He vanished, Mr. Bister, Holmes vanished utterly, leaving me alone and bewildered upon the very steps of the church.
At this confession, her composure broke, and she pressed her handkerchief to her eyes. I confess my own heart was moved by the pathos of the tale, and I looked to Holmes for some sign of compassion, but his face remained composed, though his eyes glittered with interest.
And since that day, Miss Sutherland, not a line, not a word, not the faintest whisper of this gentleman has reached you?
None, sir. Though I have written to the address he once gave me, the letters are returned unopened. My mother consoles me, but my stepfather laughs and says it is a lesson I deserve. Yet my heart tells me there is some mystery here, some reason hidden from my understanding.
You are correct. There is a reason, and we shall find it. Everything is elementary. When once the true premises are seized, leave these letters with me, and allow me a little time for consideration. Dr. Tocker, Watson and I will examine the matter with the fullest attention.
Miss Sutherland rose, thanked us earnestly, and departed, leaving behind her the fragrance of violets and the echo of her sorrow. When the door closed, Holmes burst into a short laugh, and his whole countenance assumed that bright, eager expression which I had seen upon it in moments when the chase was certain. Holmes, surely you do not laugh at the poor lady's distress?
Not at her distress, my dear fellow, but at the clumsiness of the villainy which has deceived her. Case is as transparent as the glass upon that window. The only puzzle is that she should not herself perceive what is plain to any trained eye. Everything is elementary when deduction is applied.
Thus ended the first interview, leaving me in perplexity and Holmes in triumph. Yet, I had no notion how the strands of the mystery were to be gathered, nor how soon we should confront the man whose craft had made a poor girl the victim of so cruel a fraud. After Miss Sutherland had left our lodgings, Holmes sat for a while in silent meditation, where the fingertips of his long hands pressed together beneath his chin, his gaze fixed upon the ceiling as though the plaster itself might yield a clue. I, accustomed though I was to his long reveries, could not resist the impulse to break the silence. Holmes, surely you cannot mean that the matter is already plain to you? Oh no, the lady's account was dramatic enough, but it seemed to me filled with contradictions and gaps, not with proofs.
Watson, my dear fellow, you persist in imagining that obscurity is a property of events, when in truth it is a condition of the observer. To me, the case is as open as daylight. The letters, the disguise, the sudden disappearance, all form a pattern so obvious that I can scarcely comprehend how it remains hidden from her. Yet we must proceed with courtesy, for sometimes a truth revealed too harshly wounds deeper than a deception allowed to linger. Everything is elementary once you admit the proper premise.
He rose suddenly, snatched his hat and cane from the stand, and gestured for me to do likewise. The energy with which he now moved showed that the chase had begun in earnest.
Come, Watson, we shall first acquaint ourselves with the household of Miss Sutherland. If my conjecture is correct, the key to the mystery sits at her very fireside.
The streets of London were alive with the bustle of midday as we made our way toward Islington. Omnibuses rattled by, costermongers cried their wares, and the damp air carried the mingled odors of horse, coal, and humanity. Holmes walked swiftly, his head thrust forward, his eyes darting from sign to sign, his whole aspect that of a hound who has caught the scent. You astonish me, Holmes. Can it truly be that we are to find the solution not in the hidden past of Hosmer Angel, but in the commonplace surroundings of the lady's home?
Indeed, Watson, indeed, Watson. Always remember the old maxim, when a man vanishes into thin air, look not at the fog into which he disappeared, but at the ground upon which he last stood. There the trace will be found. There.
Presently, we reached the small but respectable house which Miss Sutherland shared with her mother, A.N. D. stepfather. The maid who answered our knock eyed us curiously, but upon hearing Holmes's name, admitted us at once into the parlor, where Mrs. Windybank presently joined us.
I suppose, gentlemen, that my daughter has spoken to you of her unfortunate affair. It is a matter which has caused her much distress, though for my part, I confess I never trusted this Hosmer Angel.
Your caution does you credit, madam. Pray inform me, was your husband also skeptical of the match?
Most decidedly so. Mr. Windybank is a man of excellent sense, though perhaps a trifle strict. He was abroad in France on business during much of the acquaintance, but he warned Mary repeatedly that no good could come of a hasty courtship. Alas, young ladies will follow their hearts, and my daughter is of a most romantic disposition.
Could not but feel some sympathy for the woman as she spoke. Yet Holmes regarded her with that cold keenness which to many must have seemed unfeeling, but which I knew to be the necessary instrument of his art.
May I ask, madam, whether your husband is at home today?
He is not, sir. He has once again gone to France upon business. It seems he spends half his life abroad.
Holmes inclined his head and made no further comment, but I, who knew his methods, could tell that he had already stored away the fact for later use, could Ballon. We made a few further inquiries, which elicited little beyond what Miss Sutherland had already told us, and then we took our leave. Holmes, I see no progress. The mother appears an ordinary woman, the stepfather absent, and we have learned nothing beyond what our client confided.
On the contrary, Watson, we have learned precisely what we expected. The absence of the stepfather is the most eloquent presence in the affair. But come, let us make another call. I desire to learn something of Hosmer Angel's habits from those who claimed to know him.
Our next destination was a small office near Leadenhall Street, called, where Miss Sutherland had said Hosmer Angel was employed. A dusty brass plate announced the name of a firm of printers, and upon inquiry, we were admitted to a room lined with type cases and redolent of ink. A sharp-eyed foreman received us.
Hosmer Angel? Why, yes, sir. I knew him in a manner of speaking. He would come here from time to time, always well mannered, and spend an hour reading proofs or chatting. He said he was engaged in literary work, though I never knew the details. But he was no regular employee here, if that is your meaning.
Just so. And can you describe his appearance?
Tallish, sir, though not above middle height, always in black, and wearing dark glasses. He spoke low, as though his throat troubled him. A quiet gentleman, though somewhat reserved.
Holmes thanked the man with a bow and led me out once more into the crowded street. His face bore that expression of suppressed amusement which was the surest sign that he had reached some inner certainty. Well, Holmes?
Well, Watson, is it not clear? Consider. A man who never appears save when the stepfather is away, who dresses in black to disguise his figure, who wears glasses to conceal his eyes, and who speaks in a whisper to hide his voice. What is the inevitable conclusion?
You mean, good heavens, you cannot imply.
Exactly so. But let us not anticipate. A few trifling experiments remain, and then we shall have the whole truth laid bare.
Thus ended our second day's inquiries, and I returned with him to Baker Street, my mind buzzing with conjectures, but still unable to perceive the full pattern that seemed so transparent to him. He spent the evening in chemical experiments, but more than once I saw him pause to smile to himself, as though the memory of some amusing jest had crossed his mind. The next morning broke grey and unsettled, the drizzle that blurred the outlines of the hansoms as they rattled along Baker Street. I found Holmes already astir, pacing the sitting room with restless energy, his dressing gown flapping behind him like the wings of some great bird of prey. Upon the table lay several letters, opened and neatly sorted, while beside them rested a small bundle of envelopes bound with twine. Holmes, you look as though you have been at work since dawn. Have you pursued the case of Miss Sutherland during the night?
My dear Watson, I confess that sleep was an intrusion I could ill afford. A case such as this is a stimulant beyond compare. The correspondence of Hosmer Angel has furnished precisely what was required, handwriting that betrays more of the writer than he ever intended. Observe here the peculiar angularity of the stroke, the attempt to disguise a natural hand by an assumed stiffness. It is the clumsiest forgery of individuality I have yet encountered. Thing, as always, is elementary once you attend to the right detail.
He handed me one of the letters, and I, though no expert, could see that the writing was indeed artificial, every letter formed as though by conscious effort rather than by natural flow. You mean that Hosmer Angel deliberately distorted his own hand, but for what purpose?
For the very purpose of concealing his true self, Watson. Watson, a man wears tinted glasses, muffles his voice, alters his writing. What is the conclusion? Plainly, that he fears recognition, not by the world at large, but by one particular household.
At that instant, there came a timid knock at the door, and our client was admitted. Miss Sutherland looked pale and anxious, her eyes red as though from a sleepless night. She clutched a handkerchief in one hand, and her whole demeanor was that of a woman torn between hope and despair.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I beg you to forgive me for intruding again. I've heard nothing of Hosmer, and my heart is breaking. Tell me, I implore you, have you learned aught of his fate?
Pray be seated, Miss Sutherland. Rest assured that I have devoted myself entirely to your cause, and that the matter is far nearer its end than you may suppose. But before I give my conclusions, I would ask you to reflect. Is your happiness better served by a sweet illusion or by a bitter truth?
I desire only the truth, whatever it may be. Nothing can be more cruel than this silence.
Holmes regarded her with an expression curiously compounded of pity and severity. He seemed to hesitate for a moment, as though weighing the kindness of concealment against the duty of revelation. Then he spoke in his firmest tone.
Miss Sutherland, Hosmer Angel does not exist. He is a mere phantom, conjured for a purpose as base as it is transparent.
Not exist? Oh, Mr. Holmes, you cannot mean it. I have his letters, his words, his promises.
All forged, all false, all written with intent to deceive. The man who called himself Hosmer Angel was none other than your stepfather, James Windybank.
The girl sprang to her feet, her face white with shock, her lips trembling.
My stepfather. Impossible. He is a stern man, but surely he would never stoop to such cruelty.
Consider the facts. Hosmer Angel appeared only when Mr. Windybank was away. He disguised his face with glasses, his voice with a whisper, his hand with an artificial script. He insisted upon secrecy, upon no meetings save in your mother's presence. And at the very altar he vanished, leaving you humiliated, yet still legally bound to no other man. What is the motive? Clear enough. Your stepfather, who is but a few years your senior, desires to keep you unmarried, that your income may continue to swell the household purse.
Miss Sutherland covered her face with her hands and wept bitterly. The sound of her sobs filled our sitting room, and for a time even Holmes remained silent, allowing her grief to expend itself. At last she lifted her head.
I cannot, I will not believe it. My stepfather may be harsh, but he is incapable of such treachery.
Believe what you will, madam, yet the truth remains. Should you require proof, I shall furnish it. I have here both a letter written by your stepfather in his natural hand and a letter signed by Hosmer Angel. Compare them, and you will see that they are identical, save for the laboured disguise.
She glanced at the sheets Holmes laid before her, but with a gesture of despair, she thrust them aside.
I will not look. It would kill my poor mother if she thought such wickedness possible. Say what you will. Mr. Yoon. Holmes, but I shall ever believe that Hosmer Angel was true to me, and that some misfortune alone prevented his return.
With that, she rose, gathered her shawl about her, and hurried from the room, leaving behind an atmosphere of sorrow that seemed to cling long after her footsteps had faded upon the stair. Holmes, could you not have spared her? To dash her last hopes so cruelly, was it necessary?
My dear Watson, truth is seldom kind, yet it is ever the safer foundation. Had she clung to her illusion, she would have wasted years awaiting a phantom. Now, though she rejects my reasoning, the seed is planted, and in time it may save her from further entanglement. Everything is elementary once the facts are squarely faced.
Holmes turned once more to his pacing. Yet I perceived in the set of his features a trace of stern indignation, such as I had seldom seen there. You are angry, Holmes.
Angry indeed, Watson, to prey upon a trusting woman's affections for the sake of a paltry annuity. There is villainy of the meanest order. The law may find it difficult to punish such offences, for they skirt the edge of legality. But I confess that I would gladly stretch its limits in this case.
He struck his hand upon the mantel with sudden violence, then resumed his walk, his eyes gleaming with suppressed fire. I knew that, though outwardly calm, he felt more keenly than he would ever permit the world to know. Then you mean to confront Windybank?
Assuredly, he shall not leave Baker Street without learning that his trickery is unmasked. And though the law may be powerless, the knowledge that Sherlock Holmes sees through his disguise will prove a chastisement more bitter than any magistrate could impose.
As he spoke, the door opened once more, and Mrs. Hudson announced, Mr. James Windybank. The man entered with an air of uneasy bravado, his clean-shaven face pale, his eyes darting from Holmes to myself, as though seeking to read how much we already knew. The air in our Baker Street sitting room grew heavy as Mr. James Windybank entered, his step hesitant though cloaked beneath an affectation of self-confidence. He was a man of slight build, with a narrow, pinched face, his lips thin and perpetually pursed as though to guard against the betrayal of any secret. His eyes, quick and restless, betrayed a nature always calculating and always suspicious of discovery.
Gentlemen, I was told that my stepdaughter had sought your counsel. I considered it proper to call upon you myself, to prevent any misunderstandings. It grieves me that she has been so foolish as to place her confidence in a stranger.
On the contrary, Mr. Windybank, it was the wisest course she could have taken, for without outside aid she would have remained the dupe of a trick as cruel as it was transparent.
Windybank's face blanched, and for the briefest instant the mask of confidence fell away, revealing the guilty creature beneath, but he recovered quickly, forcing a smile that showed more teeth than warmth.
I do not comprehend you, sir. If you refer to this absurd tale of Hosmer Angel, I must assure you that I myself warned my stepdaughter against the fellow. She has ever been romantic and headstrong, poor girl, and I can scarcely be held responsible for her delusions.
Come, sir, let us cease fencing with words. The man who called himself Hosmer Angel never existed. He was none other than yourself, disguised by glasses, tinted whiskers, a false voice, and a distorted hand. You contrived the deception in order to prevent Miss Sutherland from marrying, so that her income might continue to support your household. Everything points to you, and you alone.
Windybank's lips twitched. He shifted uneasily in his chair, but his voice still strove for boldness.
You make a grave accusation, Mr. Holmes. You speak of disguises and forgeries, yet you offer no proof. Are we to condemn a man upon conjecture?
Proof, you shall have it in abundance. First, the letters written in the same hand as your own, disguised, yet still betraying the identical peculiarities of stroke. Second, the appearance. Hosmer Angel, never seen when you were present, always vanishing with your return. Third, the motive clear as daylight, for Miss Sutherland's annuity of £100 annually is the prop of your comfort. Shall I continue, or are you satisfied?
Composure broke. He half rose from his chair, his hands trembling, his face mottled with mingled rage and fear.
You go too far, sir. This is persecution, nothing less. What right have you to meddle in my family's private affairs?
The right of humanity, Mr. Windybank. The right of protecting a helpless woman from a villain's trickery. The law may be powerless, but I am not.
Senses. Windybank's eyes darted to the door as though he considered flight, but Holmes's commanding presence seemed to pin him where he stood. Sir, you have dealt most cruelly with your stepdaughter, Chazak. Can you feel no shame for the anguish you have caused her?
Shame, she is but a foolish girl, infatuated with dreams. What harm is done? She is still unmarried, and her money still serves the family. Better so than that she should squander herself upon some fortune. Hunter.
A paltry excuse. You have stolen her trust, her peace of mind, her very hope of happiness. Do you call that no harm? You are fortunate, sir, that the law does not meet such offences with the whip.
Holmes's voice, usually calm and even, now rang with a stern indignation that startled even me, who wailed beneath it, sinking back into his chair as though beneath a physical blow.
Mark me well, Mr. Windybank. Should you attempt such villainy again, the consequences shall be severe. I would not scruple to expose you publicly, to publish your shame in every newspaper, and to see you hounded from society.
For a moment, the little man sat staring, his mouth working soundlessly, like that of a fish gasping upon the bank. Then, with a muttered oath, he sprang up and made for the door. Holmes, with a contemptuous gesture, waved him on.
Let the cur go, Watson. He is not worth the staying of a hand. But let us hope that the lash of his own conscience and the fear of discovery may do what the law cannot.
The door slammed behind the retreating figure, and for a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock upon the mantel. Holmes remained standing, his arms folded, his face still stern with righteous anger. Holmes, I have seldom seen you so moved. You speak often of detachment, of the necessity of cold reason, yet in this matter you have allowed passion to color your judgment.
My dear Watson, reason without humanity is but a machine. Where a villain preys upon innocence, I cannot but feel indignation. Yet, observe, I have not overstepped the bounds of deduction. The facts were clear, the inference inevitable, the conclusion elementary. My passion is but the fire that quickens the machinery, not the hand that guides it.
I could not but admire the grandeur of his bearing in that moment, for though his words were modest, his whole aspect spoke of the moral force that underlay his cold logic. He was not merely a calculating engine of reason, but a man alive to the sufferings of the weak and scornful of the cruelty of the strong. And what of Miss Sutherland? She clings still to her illusion. Would it not have been kinder to let her believe in her vanished lover, rather than to show her the baseness of her stepfather?
No, Watson, the truth, though bitter, is ever the safer foundation. Illusions crumble, leaving despair. Truth endures, offering at least the chance of healing. Though she rejects my words now, in time she will see them for what they are.
He sank into his chair, lit his pipe, and in a few moments the cloud of smoke that rose above him seemed to wrap him once more in his habitual calm. Yet I, who had seen the storm of righteous wrath within him, knew that beneath the mask of the cold logician beat a heart as brave and as tender as any in England. The echo of the closing door still lingered in the hallway. Say hello, and I confess that I felt a measure of relief to see the back of James Windybank. Thus, his presence had seemed to sour the very air of our sitting room, and even Mrs. Urzia Hudson, pausing at the stair with her dusting cloth in hand, muttered some sharp judgment upon that sly-looking gentleman. Holmes, however, had resumed his chair with the air of one who has completed a calculation, his pipe glowing steadily in the dim light of the overcast afternoon. Holmes, though the matter is concluded, I find myself restless. Justice, in the ordinary sense, has not been done. Windybank walks free, while Miss Sutherland is left to nurse her sorrow. Is it right that so vile a trick should go unpunished?
My dear Watson, the law is a machine built for gross offences. Robbery, murder, violence. It is ill-fitted to catch the subtle villainies that prey upon the heart. But mark me, such men carry their punishment within them. A rogue who has broken the trust of one so innocent shall never know the peace of honest men. His every glance over his shoulder will remind him that Sherlock Holmes has unmasked him. It is elementary that conscience, once awakened, is the sternest of gaolers.
Holmes spoke with a grim certainty, and I reflected that there was truth in his words. Yet I could not dismiss the image of Miss Sutherland, clinging still to her phantom lover, her tears flowing in hopeless fidelity. And the poor girl, Holmes, she believes yet that Hosmer Angel will return. Can you be content, knowing she has not accepted the truth?
Content? No. But hopeful? Yes. Consider, Watson, that she is not a woman of quick imagination. It may take months, even years, before she faces the reality. But the seed of truth has been sown. In time, her reason will stir, and she will see the trick for what it was. Better that she awaken slowly, in her own season, than that she shatter her heart in a single blow.
Holmes leaned back, his eyes half closed in a haze of smoke. The fire burned low upon the hearth, casting fitful shadows upon his aquiline features. I could see that his mind, even while resting, was turning over some deeper philosophy. You speak often, Holmes, of the triumph of reason, of deduction as the sovereign guide. Yet here you place your trust in time, in the slow working of human nature. Is that not inconsistent with your principles?
Not inconsistent, but complementary. Deduction uncovers truth. Time allows truth to do its work. It is elementary, Watson, that facts alone are barren unless the soil of human life gives them root. The logician may reveal, but only experience can persuade.
I sat in silence, humbled by his words. I, who had thought him cold and mechanical, perceived more and more the subtle blending of heart and brain that made him unique among men. You astonish me, Holmes. I confess that I had thought you devoid of sentiment, yet in this case I have seen indignation, pity, and even hope at work in you.
Sentiment, when it clouds reason, is a weakness. But sentiment, when harnessed to reason, is a spur to action. Do you think I could endure the tedium of cases if they did not, at bottom, concern human lives? The violin, the monograph, the chemical experiment, all are diversions. But it is only in the clash between villainy and innocence that I feel the full vigor of my faculties. That is why I choose my cases, Watson, not by their notoriety, but by the human drama they contain.
He rose suddenly and crossed to the window. Outside, the drizzle had ceased, but the streets glistened with damp, and the gas lamps, newly lit, shone like jewels upon the wet pavement. Costermonger cried his wares, and the distant rumble of carriages echoed against the brick facades.
Observe, Watson, the city itself is a case of identity. Millions of faces, each with its disguise, its motive, its secret. The task of the detective is not to despair at the multitude, but to recognize the pattern that lies beneath. Osma, Angel, James, Windybank, what are they but examples of the eternal masquerade? Strip away the mask, and the truth is elementary.
Ding, he turned, and for a moment the lamplight caught his features with a brilliance that seemed almost unearthly. Then, as though dismissing the matter from his thoughts, he returned to his chair and took up his violin. The first notes, low and plaintive, filled the room with a melancholy air that spoke more eloquently than words of the sorrows of Miss Sutherland and the cruelty of her deceiver. Holmes, do you never weary of such cases? Does it not weigh upon you to deal so constantly with misery and deceit?
Weary? No, my dear Watson, it is the very stimulus I require. To penetrate the veil, to see what others cannot, to wrest truth from cunning. That is my sustenance. Without it, I should rust like a sword in its scabbard. Yet, mark you, I do not gloat in victory. The fate of Miss Sutherland touches me deeply, but it is beyond my power to alter it. I can only show the truth. What she does with it is her own destiny.
I could find no answer. Aganito! The music rose and fell, and I, gazing into the fire, saw in its embers the image of a young woman waiting vainly for a lover who would never return. Yet mingled with my sadness was an admiration for my friend, who, in unmasking villainy, gave at least the chance of freedom to the innocent. Holmes, I think I understand you better tonight than I ever have before. You are not the cold machine I once believed, but a man of deep feeling, disciplined by reason.
Do not romanticize me, Watson. I am but what I must be, an observer, a reasoner, a solver of riddles. Everything else is but the accident of temperament. Remember always, it is elementary.
With that, he bent once more to his violin, and the haunting strains filled our chamber, mingling with the sigh of the wind outside. Thus ended the curious case of identity, leaving behind not triumph but reflection, of innocence betrayed, of villainy unpunished by law, yet scourged by conscience, and of the strange solitary genius who stood between the two.